Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you the books that I ended up reading this September and those that I want to get to in October. I cannot believe, I feel like September just flew by. I feel like there was so many things happening, but despite being like super busy, I did manage to read a total of 6 books. I've gotten back into audiobooks recently, just because in addition to my full-time job, I'm also part-time teaching at the university, so I do a lot of driving during the day, and so it basically waiting till the Taylor Swift album comes out, I wanted to basically have just something to keep me busy for while driving. So I listened to, I think, 3 audiobooks, which was pretty good. And despite that, I got through like a good amount of like chonkers of a book. So despite it being busy, I did read 6 books total, and they're all over in terms of genre as well, which is always very exciting. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, I have Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is her book that came out earlier this year, and I read like the first 150 pages or so, and I really could not get into it. And I said if I got the audiobook from the library, I would finish it, and that I did. This book I was just incredibly disappointed by. I felt like it has a really interesting premise, but the execution of it was not great. Basically, we follow 3 different storylines where we follow, I'm just blanking on their names, but Maria, who is in the 1500s. We then follow Lottie, who is in London during the 1800s, and then we also follow Alice in Boston, kind of modern day, and there are some vampire connections in this one, and these women are connected through time, basically are connected throughout the centuries. And I don't want to spoil too much just in case you do want to read it, but like I said, this book has such an interesting premise. I really love the different like storylines with the 1500s, the 1800s, and modern day, and like the weaving of the two. That I felt like, again, it had a really interesting premise, but the execution of this was not great. I felt like there was, for a lot of this book, dealt with background on some of the characters, which I didn't feel added to the story. I felt like for how big this book is, not a lot actually happens. It is very boring, and it just was poorly executed. Like I said, it dealt so much in the background of the characters that you don't actually get to really experience any plot progression. I felt like a lot of the background information could have been condensed like by 200 pages. It just kept going on, and it was repetitive, and none of the characters were likable enough to actually be like invested in wanting to learn more about it. So I was just overall very disappointed by this. Like I said, I only finished it because I got the audiobook from the library, but yeah, I was just really disappointed with this. I really have loved Addie LaRue, but this one was just, again, interesting premise, but just poor execution on many different levels. Kind of one important theme, though, that I think this kind of delves into is kind of the extents that we go to in order to survive, which I think was really interesting. But yeah, besides that, not great. I'm very proud of this, that I was able to finish it when I did, and it is Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the final book in the Farseer trilogy. The series overall follows Fitz, who is the illegitimate son of the king in waiting, and this series kind of spans kind of a couple decades of his life, where he's kind of thrown into the kind of royal family and their politics, but there's also some other greater forces involved, and obviously this being the 3rd book in the trilogy, I can't really spoil too much about it, but basically this one, like I said, was the conclusion, and I feel like the author does a really good job at really building suspense at the end of like the previous book to really end on a cliffhanger to see how this starts. And I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed a lot of aspects of this book, but it just dragged on. I felt like the first bit of the book, first 100 pages or so, were really well done, and the last 100 pages were really well done, and then everything else in between was kind of just repetitive and really dragged on. And for like a 800 page plus page book, it was really hard to get through it sometimes, especially where it's just Fitz wandering around in the forest, and it just kind of, and he gets captured and escapes and like all these things. So it was like just repetitive to the point where I felt like it could have been condensed quite a bit and edited down where it wasn't it didn't drag on as long. But yeah, I do feel like this was really drawn out, and I felt like it really would have benefited from some editing, like maybe being 200 pages shorter. I did really enjoy what we were eventually kind of building towards, and it is very emotionally devastating at times, and some of the sacrifices, especially Fitz has to make, was really hard to bear. And yeah, it was just really emotional and devastating, and really hits you in like the heartstrings, and I can see why this series is so beloved in this world. So I know that there are like other books, and I do plan on reading more books in the world, but just with the hype, especially with the second book, it was so well done with Royal Assassin that one, even though there wasn't really a lot happening, a lot of the second book was built on small character moments that are eventually building to something greater. This one was just literally a lot of aimlessly wandering around in the woods for too long, and it just being really repetitive. So that part I was really disappointed by, but I still gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the ending, despite how kind of boring and lagging it took to get there. But yeah, it was just a little bit disappointing. So I'm hoping that I like her other series a little bit more. This was like, you know, I can see why, and this is her first trilogy, so I'll give her leniency, but I know people really love this series, and so I'm hoping they kind of evolve and improve as we kind of read more into her works. Next, this is a book I listened to on audiobook, and it is Spells for Forgetting by Adriene Young. This was one I was really excited to get to because I just felt like it had really good kind of going into fall vibes, but it follows I guess 2 main characters who haven't talked to each other in 18 years, and they've had like a lot of, they were really close, they were, you know, high school lovers, they were planning to run away together, but all that changed when a fire breaks out on the small island that they live on off the coast of Washington, and their best friend is found murdered. So this kind of has a we follow again those 2 main characters who haven't talked to each other in nearly 2 decades after the fact, and them still dealing with the repercussions of that night, the mystery surrounding that night, and then there's also kind of an eerie, creepy town vibe to it, and some sort of magic witches of women who live on this island. And I really loved the setting of this one. I felt like the vibe of the kind of this very small, close-knit community on this island was really well done, and kind of that, you know, misty, mysterious vibe. Like you have that eerie sense of something going on in that forest. I felt that part was really well done, but the main characters were very flat, and the side characters were indeterminate from each other. So I think if you even like confuse some of the names, or if you took one of the other characters' perspective out, it wouldn't really change too much. And yeah, I felt like kind of the unraveling of the story, or trying to figure out what happened, could have been very easily solved, but the author throws in kind of miscommunication, or things that, you know, take, you know, they're right about to say, the character's right about to say something, but then, you know, someone comes up and then they can't finish talking. Like, it was just kind of those distractions that I felt like really took away from the plot, and again dragged it on. And this is not a very big book at all. And I saw someone on Goodreads kind of wrote, this is a lot of drama for some apples, and I agree. So I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. I loved the atmosphere, I loved the feeling of that kind of uneasiness with the island itself, but it just kind of was disappointing all around, and like the characters were whiny and annoying, and I don't know, I couldn't like feel bad for them, because I felt like they also are to blame for their situation. So yeah, this book, I think I built it up bigger into my mind than what I was hoping for. Next, I listened to the audiobook for Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This is a kind of short novella that she wrote that takes place in this world where we follow, sorry, that is Willow moving around, good girl. But it basically follows this kingdom where people can train to be these kind of riders of these very large birds that are used to keep these mystical, dangerous, like mythical animals at bay by killing them. And so we follow our main character where she's first starting out, forming her kind of rider's bond with this very big bird, and it kind of goes from there. I really like this one. My husband had read this one too, and he said he enjoyed it, and we both agreed that I felt like although we really enjoyed it, we wanted more from it. I felt like despite having such a short amount of time, the author did a really good job at building up this world, setting up the politics, setting up a good background for the characters on why they were motivated to do certain things. I felt like even with the short amount of time that she had, she was really able to showcase that, which was really well done. I really enjoyed that, but we just wanted more. I felt like I could have got, like, unlike some of the critiques I had for some of the books I talked about here, I felt like I wanted this to be longer. I wanted it to be a full fleshed out novel where, you know, you don't have to pack so much in such a short amount of time. I think if this was even a standalone fantasy book where we can get an additional 200 pages, I think that would have been great. But yeah, I wanted just it to be a full novel, and I really enjoyed this. I do want to get a copy of this one as well to add to my collection. But if you're looking for like a quick read, a really fun, fantastical read with a unique world, suspense, action, all these things with great world building, I highly recommend you check this one out. Next, I ended up picking up The Bewitching by Silvia Morena-Garcia. This is her newest book that came out back in August, and so I was happy to finally dive in. I felt like this was a very good kind of introduction into the spooky season with some of the fall reads. So this one kind of follows 3 different storylines. Our main storyline is Minerva, who is a graduate student of English, and she is doing her thesis on her favorite horror novelist who attended the same university, and she's trying to draw parallels to the horror novel to events that happened that resulted in her friend's disappearance in the 1930s from that university. So not only do we get Minerva's perspective, but we also get her great-grandmother's perspective in Mexico in the early 1900s, where there is believed to be a bewitching happening as well. So it draws a lot of parallels between Elba, Minerva's great-grandmother, and Minerva herself. And then we also get the kind of novelist kind of diary entries from the 1930s leading up to the disappearance of her friend. This book, I felt like, does a really good job at really capturing that eerie setting. Like, you can definitely feel something unease. There are fantastical elements and paranormal elements to this, and I felt like the author does a really good job at really creating that atmosphere. Like, there was actually pretty horrific events or scary things that happened in here that I had me on the edge of my seat, and you just really get that sense of unease or feeling like something's watching you, like the characters. And I think that's something in Mexican Gothic that also she did really well, is creating that atmosphere, creating that sense of unease and all those things. And this is very much a slow burn, and you can see how it is building towards something. So I did feel that sometimes maybe it was just a little bit too slow, where I felt like we weren't really getting anywhere between any of the narratives. We kind of just were at a standstill for a bit, and then it eventually starts to pick up. So that was my one kind of critique of this one. But the ending was really fun and intense and suspenseful, and I couldn't put it down. The last 50 pages or so, you're just like, oh my goodness. So I really liked it. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought this was a solid read. I think kind of with this Gothic horror or this type of horror is that it just is kind of slow and eventually starts to build. But like I said, I just had a little bit of a hard time, but nevertheless I still really enjoyed it. I did really feel that sense of unease, and my husband read this as well and he enjoyed it, and we were talking about this after I finished it, and we both agree that she does a really good job at really creating that atmosphere and that sense of unease. There is some interesting things, I will say, so just check out the trigger warnings for this, because I don't want to spoil what happens, but I kind of was a little bit grossed out by something that happens in here. So just be aware, just look at the trigger warnings for this one. But otherwise, I feel like this is a great book to kind of read around the Halloween spooky season. And lastly, to round up my books, like I said, I read a lot this month, and it was the audiobook for 170 Days by Kamala Harris. I'm really excited too, because I was able to snag a signed copy, so it's really cool to have something that's signed by her. But basically, I'm sure you've seen this book talk about everywhere, on every media basically, but this is her recount of the 107 days from when Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race to eventually her becoming the head of the ticket to the election. And I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I listened to the audiobook of this, and you can see how she you can kind of get a lot of the emotion. And I think this book was really well done. It was well written, and it was very candid and honest too. She doesn't really hold back from, you know, what she was thinking or critiquing things that she said or what happened. She's very honest with mistakes that were made, her honest about the opinions of things that happened, and having that candor really kind of packed an emotional punch. Like I said, I was listening to the audiobook for this one, and I would be driving to work with tears in my eyes because I still feel like I'm very much grieving from what happened, and I really wanted her to win so bad. And it was my first election that I got to vote in as an American citizen, and I feel like I just can't help but wonder like what could have been. And so like there would be times when I'd be driving to work or, you know, driving, you know, to school to teach, like I would have tears in my eyes, getting very emotional, because it's like you know what's going to happen. You've seen how this film ends and you don't like how it's ending, and you just still have that kind of little bit of hope that things would turn out different. And like I said, it was a very emotional read because I really was rooting for her, and just with the state of things now, it's very hard to read this, but I feel like she's very honest, and kind of getting her perspective of what happened, I think, was really, you know, incredibly moving. And she doesn't end on she concludes this book with not it being like very, you know, sad or having like no fate for what's gonna, or no hope for what's gonna happen. I think she gives some, you know, inspiration that, you know, things can look up, but it will take a lot of work. So it just, like I said, it did make me really emotional. My sister also read this too, and she loved it as well. So yeah, definitely I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It was probably one of the best books I've read, and like I said, I was incredibly moved by it. It's a very emotional reading experience, and I really appreciated her honesty. And lastly, let's move on to the books that I plan on reading in October. Like I said, I feel like I've had a really good momentum with reading again. I feel like it was a lot of hit or miss with the beginning of the year, and I finally have gotten back on track to just reading and to kind of, you know, enjoying reading again, which is always good. But to start out, first up, I have The Grey Wolf by Louise Penny. This is her book that came out last year in the Inspector Gamache series, which is my favorite series of all time, but the newest installment comes out at the end of October, and this, I would say, is part 2, The Black Wolf, which comes out October 28th. I'm looking at my calendar here. But it is basically a part 2 to The Grey Wolf. So because they're so interconnected and is basically going to take place right after the events of the first book, I wanted to make sure that it was fresh in my mind. So I'm going to reread this one in preparation for that. And currently, yesterday, I just started this book, which I'm really excited about, and it is Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. I'm sure you've seen this book everywhere, but I'm finally sat down to read this. My husband just read this recently as well, and he really enjoyed this, so I'm really excited to kind of dive in. I'm about like 30 pages into it, so I'm not very far, but it follows 2 students who are studying magic at Cambridge, and they're kind of one of their advisor has, due to some sort of magical incident, is sent to hell, so they need him in order to graduate, so they team up to try to bring him back from hell. But it's interesting, their dynamic, because there's definitely tension. They don't like each other, and it kind of goes from there. I think I just want to kind of go into this not knowing too much, but I'm really enjoying it so far. I really love this setting. I feel like I really enjoyed Babel, but she published a couple years ago, but I felt like that was very slow. This one, you really hit the ground running from the beginning, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I've heard this one also kind of has a light romance in here, so we'll see how that goes. But like I said, I'm currently diving into this one right now, and so far so great. Next up, I have Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. This is her newest book that again came out in August. I'm still kind of trying to catch up with some of the new releases that has come out within the last few months, and this is her newest kind of fairy tale retelling that I believe is based off of Snow White. And my husband, he is a speed reader, which makes me really jealous, but he's also read this one as well, and he said he really enjoyed it. So it says, Healer Anya regularly drinks poison, not to die but to save, seeking cures for those everyone else has given up on. But a summons from the king interrupts her quiet, herb-obsessed life. Her daughter Snow is dying, and he hopes Anya's unorthodox methods can save her. Aided by a tactical guard, a narcissistic cat, and a passion for the scientific method, Anya rushes to treat Snow, but nothing seems to work. That is until she finds a secret world hidden inside a magic mirror. This dark world may hold the key to what is making Snow sick, or it might be the thing that kills them all. This seems interesting. I really love this author and how she kind of creates a ragtag team of misfits in the sense of found family. So I think this will be a fun kind of palate cleanser after a kind of dense book like Katabasis. This is another new release that I'm really excited about, and it is Hot Wax by ML Rio. I really loved If We Were Villains, and this is her newest release that has come out, and it just seems really interesting. But it says, summer 1989, 10-year-old Suzanne is drawn like a magnet to her father's forbidden world of electric guitars and trick-out cars. When her mother remarries, she jumps at the chance to tag along the concert tour that just might be Gil and the Kills' wild ride to glory. But fame has sharper fangs than anybody realized, and as the band blazes up the charts, internal power struggles set Gil and his group on a collision course destined for a bloody reckoning, one shrouded in mystery and lore for years to come. The only witness to a desperate act of violence, Suzanne spends the next 29 years trying to disappear. She trades the chaos and music of her youth for the quiet of the suburbs and the company of her mild-mannered husband, Rob. But when her father's sudden death resurrects the troubled past she tried so hard to bury, she leaves it all behind and hits the road in search of answers. Hitching her fate and Gil's beloved car to an old Airstream trailer and the two vagabonds who call it home, she finds everything she thought she'd lost forever: desire, adventure, and the woman she once wanted to be. But Rob refuses to let her go. Determined to bring her back where he thinks she belongs, Rob chases her across the country and drives her to a desperation all her own. This one just seems interesting, completely different from If We Were Villains, so I'm very excited to see kind of what this has in store. I don't even know what to expect, really. And lastly, we'll see if I get to this, because I do have quite an ambitious TBR this month, and it is The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. This one just seems like it will be very moving, but it says, Esme is born into a world of words. Motherless and irrepressibly curious, she spends her childhood in the Scriptorium, an Oxford garden shed in which her father and a team of dedicated lexicographers are collecting words for the very first Oxford English Dictionary. Young Esme's place is beneath the sorting table, unseen and unheard. One day, a slip of paper containing the word bondmaid flutters beneath the table. She rescues the slip and learns that the meaning means slave girl, begins to collect other words that have been discarded or neglected by the dictionary men. As she grows up, Esme realizes that words and meanings relating to women's and common folks' experiences often go unrecorded, and so she begins in earnest to search out words for her own dictionary, the Dictionary of Lost Words. To do so, she must leave the sheltered world of the university and venture out to meet the people whose words will fill those pages. But yeah, I think this just seems so interesting. I know it's set during kind of the women's suffragettes movement, and that just seems really fun and interesting. So I really hope I can get to this month, because I feel like this will just be a very kind of moving book. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books that you read in September are and which ones you plan to read in October. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.